Welcome into a Wednesday, December 11th edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, where we are looking for inbox questions for the back half of the show. The show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365 as we welcome Frank Saravalli back to the show. Frank, you're back from Florida looking tan.
Yeah, not really. Didn't really see outside much. I was stuck inside lobbies waiting for people to wrap meetings, but that's the nature of the beast.
Like, the Board of Governors meetings don't sound exciting by any means, but is that really all it is just standing around?
Yes, standing outside of meeting rooms and ballrooms waiting against a wall for people to walk by who may or may not have any time of day for you.
Riveting stuff, but we will get to your Board of Governors recap in a couple of minutes here. We are also going to be joined by Jesse Montano from Colorado for our big segment of the day. And also we want to hear from you on our Dominion Lending Center's poll question, which is based around the Nashville Predators. What should the Predators do? Should they make a coaching change? Should they make a trade? Or should they sit on their hands and do nothing and just maybe wait out this storm? Have your say. We'll talk about that more in a bit, but let's talk about one of the big results from last night to kick off the show, Frank, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs picking up an overtime win. They were up against their old head coach, Sheldon Keefe, and I thought it was pretty funny, the number of Leafs fans who were saying that this was a classic Sheldon Keefe loss, where his team put up a ton of shots, got absolutely nothing going on the power play, got goalied, and lost a 1-goal game. But Austin Matthews got the last laugh with the OT winner. The star of the show, though, it's Anthony Stolarz, and it continues to be for Toronto.
Yeah, and with all due respect to anyone who wants to point out the great season that Mitch Marner is having, and he's certainly been their best skater, there is zero question in my mind who the MVP of the Toronto Maple Leafs is so far this season, and it's Anthony Stolarz. The amazing part about this year is that he's now getting closer to at least his career high in games played. That's been the big question that everyone's asked is, can Anthony Stolarz all season long from start to finish, either in tandem or as a guy that takes the ball and runs with it, can he play 50 games and hold up? I see no signs of this guy slowing down. He's so big and he's also so controlled. You look at his save percentage so far this year, he's given this team a huge shot in the arm and a boost in confidence. And it's not that they haven't had reason to, but they've won a few games that they probably shouldn't along the way, which is the mark of a true good goalie.
Mark of a true good goalie, mark of a true Stanley Cup contender as well. And the Leafs haven't gotten a lot of goaltending performances like that over the last couple of years. Go back to 12 months ago. We were right in the middle of all the Ilya Samsonov drama out in Toronto. You mentioned Stolarz and his numbers. Since the beginning of last season, no goalie who's played in at least 30 games has a better save percentage than Anthony Stolarz at a 926. Second on that list is Connor Hellebuck at a 923. No one else is.
What's the games played disparity, though?
It's 43 to 83, which is exactly what I was getting to, because when you look at that top five, he's at 43. The second fewest on that list is Demko at 52. Everyone else is above 70.
See, here's the thing, though. Team save percentage this year, according to Hockey Reference, league average is 894. Wild are first at 917, which is not surprising given the success that they've had. Also not surprising would be the Winnipeg Jets, second, led by Connor Hellebuck, but the Leafs third at 911. That's a really impressive mark, and this team has been so much better for the goaltending that they've gotten. And I think maybe the most exciting part about it is that if these guys can run the table this year, you've also got them locked up for another year and beyond. And so that's, if this is working and the Leafs have true value tandem goaltending, the cap increasing just further gives you more ammo to go out and improve your team elsewhere.
Also, further proof that goaltending is absolute voodoo. Anthony Stolarz, 30 years old, has stops in Philly, Edmonton, Anaheim, and Florida, and now seems to be finally settling in as a true number one in Toronto. Seriously, though, Frank, you mentioned the games.
I was in Philly. I watched Anthony Stolarz the beginning of his career, second round pick, tracked him. He's from Central Jersey. I've seen him sort of rise through the ranks, and I can tell you when the Flyers let him walk, the thought process was he's just a guy.
I remember, so they traded him to Edmonton at the deadline, right? And they got Cam Talbot. And on the last game of the season, game 82, the Oilers had an option. They could play Anthony Stolarz and keep his RFA rights, or they could start Mikko Koskinen, who is already under contract, and basically just say, yeah, Anthony Stolarz, go be a UFA. We don't care. They started Mikko Koskinen, he became a UFA. Like, that's how little teams thought of him a few or 5-6 seasons ago. Again, it's crazy. On a serious note, you mentioned the games played. Is that something you think Toronto needs to be mindful of and maybe give Joseph Woll a run here? Or is it one of those, like, in for a penny, in for a pound? Like, throw him out there. If he can do it, let's see if he can do it.
No, I think it is something to monitor, and not because I don't think he can do it, but also because I don't think you want Joseph Woll to get lost in the process here. As good as Stolarz has been, a lot of people still view Joe Woll as their goaltender of the future, and he's also signed longer term and at a bigger number than Anthony Stolarz. So you want him to feel comfortable, you want him to get that confidence up, and also you want him to try and play his way through what has been a few injury-riddled seasons. So you want him on the ice as much as you can. I'm not saying it should be a dead even split. I think Stolarz should probably be getting 55 or 60% of the starts, but I think it's still really important to get Joe Woll in there because he's also been pretty good himself.
Yeah, that is fair as well. Speaking of goaltending, a sight for sore eyes out in Vancouver is Thatcher Demko finally made his return to the crease. Yes, he gave up 4 goals on 25 shots. Yes, the Canucks lost in overtime, but they had not seen their franchise goaltender since April 21st in that first round series against the Nashville Predators. I would imagine Canucks management is just happy to see this guy back, make it through a full game as well. I know there was a bit of a scary moment where he kind of got like knocked down or tripped, and I'm sure that had a lot of Canucks fans holding their breath, Frank. But when you couple this with the JT Miller news, he's returning and skating with the team, hasn't yet gotten into game action, hasn't played since November 17th when he took that leave of absence. To have Miller on the cusp of returning, to have Demko back and making it through an entire game, that's got to just be a massive sigh of relief, not just for the fan base, but for that management and Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, so JT Miller expected to join the team for practice today. He was out there for the morning skate yesterday. This is sort of the next step in the process to be a full participant in practice, at which point he'll also have to eventually answer some questions from the media and shed some light on his leave of absence, which I think even if, everything is taken at face value, which I think you should, someone getting a mental and physical reset in the middle of the season is sort of highly unprecedented. So I'm interested to hear what he has to say. And yes, all of those things are true. Getting Demko back, huge. Eventually Miller, yes, of course, one of the true play drivers in the league. And then 6 weeks or 8 weeks from now, Philip Hronek will return, and finally you can have some semblance of normalcy for this Canucks team. However, I still don't understand the splits between home and road for this team. It is absolutely bonkers. And this team, yes, even process-wise, the road trip to finish it off last week wasn't great. They picked up wins that they probably shouldn't have, a couple games that they came from behind in, but still, they are 10-2-1 on the road. They if you just extrapolated that out over the course of the season, they'd be one of the best teams in the league. Unfortunately, they come home and they forget how to play. And I don't understand it, particularly for a team that was so good at home last year. It is truly one of the most perplexing things that I've seen in the NHL this season.
Yeah, like again, the flip on the whole thing is just crazy. If you just take overtime out of it and just go wins, losses, 4-10 at home, 10-3 on the road. There is a part of me that when something is that off, I just sit there and go, it's got to be like partially bad luck too. Like there's no way.
Fumigate it. You got to just get in there and whatever you need to do, just turn that thing upside down. Something's wrong. Something's rotten when you get home, and that's the way you play.
Start telling the other team to pack their dark sweaters and start wearing white on home ice. Maybe that's something that
I do not get it.
Well, one team that is just like, hey, we don't care if it's on the home or on home ice or on the road. We just want to win point blank. That's the Nashville Predators, Frank. Another loss last night. And I'll call them scary signs, disappointing, lifeless signs, whatever word you want to use. They fall 4-3 to the Calgary Flames in a game in which they held 3 separate leads. They're down by 1 going into the third. They muster up just 7 shots, 5 of them at 5-on-5. This team has no pushback right now. They seem to, even when something goes well, the vibes when you watch is just like they almost play like they know something's going to go wrong. And then because of that, something goes wrong. They're the topic of our poll question. And it's an interesting one, Frank, because we've heard that Barry Trotz, a former coach, doesn't want to be the guy to fire Andrew Brunette. He doesn't want to have to pull that trigger at this point. but they're dead last in the Western Conference. Is Andrew Brunette safe, or is the tune starting to change in Nashville?
They're dead last in the NHL. They're now behind the Chicago Blackhawks, 32nd in the league. You can stick a fork in the Nashville Predators. They're done. Their season's over. It's a pure math problem at this point. They need at least 73 points over their final 53 games of the season. That's a 113-point pace for a team that has shown no capability to play at that level. So for me, my answer to our Dominion Lending Center poll question of the day would be do nothing. It would be so easy right now. I guess you could make a coaching change if you wanted to. You could make a trade. But to think that you're going to make a trade and inject someone new into this group, even if you're taking and getting addition by subtraction, and this team is suddenly going to go on a run, my suggestion would be that the best thing to do right now is to sit back and wait, because you can do more long-term damage to this team by making a trade now than by helping them. And that's, I think, the point that they've arrived in, with the math being so daunting, 113-point pace to close out the year to make the playoffs. It's just not happening. So at some point you have to do something a little bit different. And the different would be, don't try and make a trade, because Barry Trotz has been all over it. Teams that I talked to said last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they thought Nashville was really close to making a deal, but they also got a sense that they weren't entirely sure that Barry Trotz knew exactly what he wanted to do, because there were so many different options on the table, that I think that's the reason why you pull back now and say, we might be throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. You look at potential trade options, and it's not like they're sitting there with a plethora of pending UFAs or RFAs that they could move on from on their current roster. There are 4 pending free agents: Gustav Nyquist, Luke Evangelista, Juuso Parssinen, and Mark Del Gaizo. So not exactly a lot of names to pick from. And if they're going to do something, it's someone with term, which would lead you to believe it's a relatively significant deal. We also got a question in here from Trev, who asked for a Roman Josi injury update. Nothing officially from the Preds. Josi last night went down, left the game, came back, played 3 more shifts, and then was ruled out. So lower body injury for Roman Josi, and we'll wait an official update there.
And also waiting on an official Trevor Zegras knee update today. I don't think it's going to be good, but keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and that is a shame, as Zegras was looking to get things back on track in Anaheim. Frank, let's recap the Board of Governors meeting before we get to our big segment for the day. Nothing, I guess, that you'd call groundbreaking, but let's start with the CBA talks. What's the latest there, and maybe when they plan to resume?
Yeah, so they plan to begin talks in February, which, if you think about it, makes sense. These two sides are going to be spending a lot of time together with the Four Nations Faceoff, where they're playing 7 games over an 11-day stretch. That is a key, likely focal point during Four Nations. And what they spent this Board of Governors meeting, not only with the smaller executive committee, but also with their collective bargaining committee, was really just working through their bullet points of, hey, here are the things that we want to tackle. This is our game plan. And we're going to be, making these final preparations to then go into these conversations in February with the NHLPA. By the way, Marty Walsh, NHLPA Executive Director, they're coming through Philadelphia today. They're getting closer to wrapping up their fall tour, where they speak and sit down with all 32 teams, and they get their marching orders from the players as to what the players would like to see happen in these CBA negotiations. So expected to start in February. And that brings us then to the cap. Everyone wants to know, what's the cap looking like for next season? The answer is, we'll find out when some of those discussions start in February. What the Board of Governors was told this week was, we have 2 options. We can either go by the letter of the contract that we've signed, the MOU, and we can have a 5% increase, which would take it from $88 million to $92.5, or we can negotiate something higher with the NHLPA that would likely kind of phase in or smooth out what would be a somewhat larger jump as revenue gets relinked to the cap. And the truth is, it can increase more than from 88 to 92.5, But as we know from last year, the NHL wanted to also increase the escrow percentage that's withheld, and the NHLPA balked at that. So there's going to have to be some give and take here, that some side's going to want something in order to move it beyond exactly what this contract calls for. So it could be part of the CBA talks. It could be separate and aside from it. Point is, there's a lot still to discuss.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about the cap going up, because the simple part of my brain, which is most of it, by the way, goes, well, wait, the players should want that and the GMs should want that. So who's against it? But there is a lot more to it behind the scenes, right?
Well, there's also owners who are like,
Yeah.
every year that we don't have the cap increase, which I guess, I don't know. It depends how you think about it. If you're an owner that's like, hey, I don't know, put yourself in the shoes of Craig Leopold, Minnesota Wild. He's like, I've got Kirill Kaprizov that I got to pay next season. I want this cap going up as much as possible. But if you're another team who might be a lower revenue team that's like, man, if we make the same amount of money next year and we keep the cap low, then that means more money for us in the end in terms of profit. So it depends on how you think about it. It depends on your viewpoint, just like anything else in politics and life. Everyone comes at things from a different angle.
Let's get to today's big segment, Frank. It's the All 32, and it's brought to you by Fountain Tire. They treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle, whether you need new tires or maybe your engine has a little rattle. Stop into Fountain Tire today, and they'll sort you out. Plus, for the next couple of days, you can save up to $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, up until December 14th, plus $50 on any service of $150 or more. Some restrictions apply. Stop into Fountain Tire or check them out online at fountaintire.com. Excited to welcome Jesse Montano back to the program. He covers the Colorado Avalanche for Guerrilla Sports. And Jesse, let's start with the trade that was made earlier this week. The Avs have completely overhauled their goaltending in the matter of a couple of weeks. And I'll just start with your opinion on this. Do you like this set of moves? Is it enough for the Avs? And does this give them Stanley Cup caliber goaltending? Or was this maybe a little bit of a panic move? Where do you come out on it?
You know, when you look at the full body of work, both moves that are made, I actually really like it. Look, they had to make a move, right? Everyone was watching, everyone was seeing what was going on in net, league worst save percentage. The advanced metrics all said that the team was playing relatively well, not maybe to the level that we've come to expect over the last couple of years, but they couldn't get a stop. So Chris McFarland had to go out and do something. I think the Scott Wedgwood deal is a really nice one in terms of locker room fit. I know he's a backup goalie, but he really seems like he's breathed some life into this team and just the right mentality and being vocal in the room. And then the Blackwood deal. Look, I think that Mackenzie Blackwood's still a little bit unproven. His time in New Jersey, when that team started to ramp up, he crumbled a little bit, maybe under that pressure. So there's a question mark around, can he handle coming to a Stanley Cup contender and being the guy that the Avs are looking to carry them to that place. But I like the move. I think these are two guys that can give you average to slightly above average on most nights. And when this team is going, as we just saw in this last 5-game trip, that's all they need. This is a talented team. When they're healthy, it's a deep group. You got the elite skill on the high end. They just need average to above average on most nights. And I think this pair of moves can give it to them. And really, in the grand scheme of things, maybe a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 assets more than you would have liked on the Blackwood deal, but nothing that you can't live without. I think this was a couple nice bits of business by Chris McFarland. And hey, look, it takes a pretty big set to completely turn over your goalie room before Christmas. So he said that the team was owed this and that they needed to go out and make a move for him.
Yeah, first team in NHL history to completely change out its tandem from opening night before Christmas. But Jesse, you hit on one thing that I want to drill down on, which is the goalies being a breath of fresh air. You heard Nathan MacKinnon sort of vaguely reference this in his post-game interview on Tuesday night in Pittsburgh. You heard Chris McFarland kind of hint at this as well. But just getting Alexander Georgiev and his negative attitude out of the room, how much do you think that is just going to also be a breath of fresh air for this team?
Well, and Chris McFarland made sure, like to your point, Frank, he made sure to call out that bringing in Mackenzie Blackwood and he was lumping in Scott Wedgwood, said that these are cultural fits. These are guys that are going to fit in the locker room, and it's important to us. I don't think any of the guys on the Avs, didn't like Alexander Georgiev. They battled with him every night. I'm sure they think he's a nice guy. I had nice interactions with him in the locker room, but look, there were multiple instances that we saw on the ice, whether it be last season or even this year, where he's barking at guys. Maybe you could say a little quick to point the finger when pucks were going in the back of the net. And I just think that when, Nathan MacKinnon yells at a lot of guys too. He's also the reigning MVP, 140 point getter. It makes a difference. And I think, look, Nathan MacKinnon also made comments, 2 weeks ago in Tampa Bay when they had that nightmare game in Tampa Bay, lost 8-2. I talked to him after the game and he said the pucks were going in the net and there was nothing we could do to stop it. I read between the lines a little bit on that. And that was, I think, the most vocal frustration that we heard from any player or coach with the goaltending, saying, yeah, we just didn't matter what we did. If we were playing in the offensive zone, if we were playing good defense, the pucks were going in the net. There was nothing we could do. And I do just think you're right. It was just a negative energy around the entire goaltending situation. I think guys were frustrated. I think the goaltenders were then in turn frustrated back because guys were frustrated with them. And I think you're right, Frank. I think it was just a negative energy, negative aura, and you've turned the page on it. We don't have to talk about it anymore. Now you've got two guys that the only thing I had to do is go out and stop the puck. And I think it is going to make a big difference. Alexander Georgiev, like I said, I only had positive interactions with him, but I had been told that he could be a little bit prickly sometimes in that room. And I think just with the guys you brought in, that's not going to be the case. Scott Wedgwood, we made comments on his first game, that game in Buffalo, where Georgiev gives up 4 goals in the first. Wedgwood comes in. The Avs end up having their second biggest comeback in franchise history to win that game in regulation. And the first thing Scott Wedgwood does in the locker room when the team makes him the player of the game, he gets up and gives credit to Georgiev, saying it took both goaltenders to win this game here tonight. And I just think that's the kind of attitude that they needed, whether he meant it or not. Just, hey, we're all in this together. We're all going to battle every night. And I think you can see on the ice that the Avs are just playing with new energy. And they seem to have this attitude of like, all right, let's go. The management went out and did something for us. We're going to go out and perform. But I do think, not that Georgiev or Annunen weren't friends with any of the guys, but I do think that had just soured and they needed to move on.
Yeah, just ask Tony D'Angelo, who ate a blocker in the face from Georgiev in New York. Right. All of a sudden, the idea of that whole thing changes. But I wanted to actually bring it back because we did run your clip on our show from that night in Tampa when Nathan MacKinnon said that. Just if that's what he was saying publicly, what do you think was being said behind the scenes and making the same point to Chris MacFarland? And really, how much does this entire team and their energy run off the back of what Nathan MacKinnon does and says?
No, you're totally right. Nathan MacKinnon is the emotional engine of this Avalanche team. And when he's frustrated with a situation, guys follow suit behind that. You know what I mean? And the advanced numbers say that this Avalanche team has not played poorly to start. Again, maybe not to the level that we've come to expect over the last couple of years, but they've played well. They've battled hard. They've competed. And there's just been so many nights where it's like, they lost that game because they couldn't get a save. And I think you can put up with that for a few nights. They came out of the gate slow. Well, we'll turn the page. It wasn't ending. You'd get 1 or 2 good starts out of Georgiev, and then it'd be right back to what you were dealing with a week before. And I think exactly what you're saying. That was what he was willing to say to me, let alone when they're out at dinner or, behind closed doors or even in the locker room in between periods. I just think that relationship got to a point where you couldn't go on with it. You could not wait to see if they were going to turn it around and, get going on the right track. I just think that it had gone bad in the locker room to the level that Chris MacFarland said, we need to make a change. He used the phrase shook us to our core in his availability the other day after acquiring Mackenzie Blackwood, saying that that was what the start of the season from the goaltenders did to them. So it went beyond just what we were seeing on the ice for sure.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about another thing Chris MacFarland said, and he kind of added, they want to keep doing things to improve this team. And when I look at the fact they don't have a first rounder this year, they don't have a third rounder this year, no second and third rounder next year, my kind of 2-part question to you is, what do you think Chris MacFarland still wants to do, and how can he accomplish it with that little assets?
And little cap space.
Yeah.
So the cap space is the big one. Now, I've been told that they've got a date somewhere around 4 Nations where internally they're going to make a decision on Gabe Landeskog for this season, at least for the regular season. And so I really take that to mean we are going to know going into Four Nations if we've got his cap space for flexibility or if we need to be counting on him coming back before the start of the playoffs. So I think they're waiting a little bit on that. I also think Chris McFarland wants to wait to see how healthy they get. Jared Bednar just went on the radio this morning and said reinforcements really aren't that close to entering the lineup or re-entering the lineup. So I think they want to wait a little bit, see who gets back healthy, see how long they can stay healthy, looking at Jonathan Drouin, and then reassess. We've had a lot of conversations this season around the Avs prospect pipeline is ranked pretty low, exactly like what you're saying, Tyler. Like there's not a lot there, but they also maybe deserve a little bit of credit. Ivan, Nikita Prishepov, they were able to use Nikolai Kovalenko as a nice asset that I don't know you would have been able to do before the start of the season. They've had to there's been 7 NHL debuts for the Avs this season. So they've been able to pull some decent talent out of that pipeline. But you're right. They're going to have to get creative with it if they want to continue making moves. I don't think anything is imminently coming. I think when Chris McFarland said that, my guess is that he is talking a little bit closer to the deadline, maybe right after Four Nations, making some moves. He got out ahead of it on the goaltender side of it, but I like their depth up front. I think they'd maybe like a little bit more depth on D. They've kind of had a rotating cast of guys there filling in on that 6th spot that they don't seem fully satisfied with any of them. So I really do think he is talking a solid bottom 6, maybe a center if you can find it, maybe a depth D. So nothing crazy, but I do still think Chris McFarland's antennas are up on how he can improve this team before the deadline.
Jesse Montano from Guerrilla Sports. You do great work there. You give us great analysis here. Thanks for popping on.
Anytime, boys. Always got time for you. Thanks so much.
Moving along to our daily face-off inbox question, #AskDFO. Frank, you hadn't been on the show the last couple of days. One of our big topics was the Buffalo Sabres, and Thor wants your opinion on it. He says, Frank, when do the Sabres fire Adams? We need a lifeline out here. What can you tell Sabres fans?
I don't have an answer to that. You'd have to ask Terry Pegula, and I've heard the chants too there. Where is Terry? Look, I think this team needs stability. I think they need to make a move at some point too. I know that I was asked this morning with the Morning Cup of Hockey boys, they were saying, is tonight's like game loser goes home? And like they're being dead serious. And I think anytime you enter a night like tonight with two teams that are scuffling, not only are emotions high, but if you're going into it thinking that you're going to make changes based on the outcome or result of one game, like you've already told yourself a lot of what you need to know, and you've made that decision. That said, I think as much as Kevin Adams has preached patience and has preached being methodical about the way that this should all come together, I think there's a ton of truth to that. I also think that at some point, when you see the same result time after time with mostly the same core, that you then also need to make changes to it. And so I'm not at all advocating for a GM change, but I think that they certainly last week's press conference included some unforced errors. And beyond that, you've got assets that you can move. Jack Quinn has been a healthy scratch. He's a highly thought of player that I think, you'd be trading him at his lowest value, but you've got capital to make things happen. It's just a question of whether you want to or not.
Yeah, that is fair. Let's move along to our daily bets brought to you by Bet365. Once again, use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I fired up their same game parlay tool for this bad boy. Over 5.5 goals between the Ducks and Senators. They met just 10 days ago, and the over hit in that hockey game. And then I'm tacking on Brady Tkachuk and Troy Terry to each get a point. If the scoring is going to be high, pretty reasonable to expect both Tkachuk and Terry to be involved. Tkachuk is over a point per game this season. Troy Terry, 6 points in his last 5 games, and coming off a 2-goal performance against Montreal, plus 200 on that same gamer, courtesy of Bet365. And we'll wrap up the show with garbage time. Frank, an announcement yesterday from Kevin Shattenkirk that he is calling it a career after 952 regular season NHL games. He had stops in a whole bunch of markets, but happy trails to Kevin Shattenkirk.
Yeah, and actually had an opportunity about a month ago, early November, to join the Edmonton Oilers, and had already decided at that point that it was probably time to hang up the skates. What an incredible career that Kevin Shattenkirk had. You mentioned the 952 regular season games, but another 91 in the postseason, one of the best offensive D-men in the league for a stretch of time. And look, I think what you think about with Kevin Shattenkirk is how well liked he was. And then you read his thank you to everyone that had an impact on his game. I can't remember a player ever thanking team services staff. Like, you hear equipment managers and trainers, but he mentioned team services and also PR, two of the most thankless jobs in the league for sure. And so it just tells you what kind of person Kevin Shattenkirk is. And it was fun to pop on Morning Cup of Hockey with him today. He joined, and just a random cameo by James Van Riemsdyk and some others that have been through the U.S. National Development Program at the same time, that played against each other for a long time in the NHL. He was a really popular teammate, and you can see why. So happy trails to Kevin Shattenkirk, and congratulations. And I'm sure we'll see him somewhere soon, probably on a TV near you.
Yeah, and he had a great interview, like you said, with the guys on Morning Cup of Hockey this morning. To wrap up the show, Frank, our Dominion Lending Center poll question results: is your mortgage up for renewal? Lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Centers. Visit dominionlending.ca. The YouTube chat said 41% make a trade, and the Twitter also, or X you could call it, also was in favor of making a trade, all the way up at 50%. But one thing was apparent: the public not really in on the Andrew Brunette firing. It was almost the last option on the X poll. It was the last option on our YouTube chat.
And I'm a fan of doing nothing for all the reasons I mentioned, but people don't like nothing. They want something. They want heads on spikes.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Speaking of coaching, the Coaches Room tomorrow with John Goyens will return, so look forward to that and more on the show. That is a wrap on a Wednesday edition of the program. Everybody in the YouTube, drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed before you close your window today. And once again, keep it locked on Daily Faceoff. We'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.